The Aorus 7 is a new 17-inch gaming laptop from Gigabyte that I first saw at Computex earlier this year. So let's check it out in this detailed review and help you decide if this laptop is worth it. I've got the SA version of the Aorus 7, so there's an Intel i7-9750H CPU, Nvidia GTX 1660 Ti graphics, 16GB of memory and dual channel, a 17.3-inch 144Hz 1080p IPS screen, and 512GB M.2 NVMe SSD and 1TB hard drive. For network connectivity, it's got Gigabit Ethernet, 802.11 AC Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth 5. The Aorus 7 is also available with RTX 2060, GTX 1650, or 1050 graphics. You can find examples and updated prices linked in the description. The Aorus 7 is only available in 17 inches, and while the Aorus 5 I've previously reviewed is only available in 15 inches, they both use a completely different chassis. The lid is a smooth matte black plastic with silver accents and Aorus logo, while the interior is also matte black plastic. There were no sharp corners or edges anywhere, and the build quality felt okay. However, it wasn't as nice feeling compared to some other plastic machines I've tested. The weight is listed at around 2.5 kilos, though mine was a bit more than this. With the 180-watt power brick and cables for charging included, the total weight increases to 3.2 kilos. The dimensions of the Aorus 7 are 39.9cm in width, 28.2cm in depth, and 2.9cm in height. It's not quite a thin machine, but otherwise wasn't that big compared to many other 17-inch units. I measured the screen bezels at 9.5mm. The 17.3-inch 1080p 144Hz IPS screen has a matte finish, viewing angles looked fine, and there's no G-Sync here. I've measured the color gamut of the panel using the Spider 5 Pro and got 96% of sRGB, 67% of NTSC, and 72% of Adobe RGB. At 100% brightness, I measured the panel at 328 nits in the center and with the 870:1 contrast ratio. So overall, pretty good results for a gaming laptop. I'd happily use it for photo or video editing too. Backlight bleed wasn't too bad in person, though the section from the bottom right was occasionally noticeable when viewing darker content, but this will vary between laptops. There was some screen flex due to the plastic build, though the hinges felt sturdy enough and helped with stability by being out towards the corners. It wasn't possible to open up with one finger as more of the weight is up towards the back, as you'll see when we look inside later. Despite the thinner bezels, the 720p camera is found above the display in the center.
This is what the webcam and microphone look and sound like on the Aorus 7 laptop. Here's what typing sounds like, and this is what it sounds like when you set the fan speed to maximum. So you can still hear me over the fan.
The keyboard has RGB lighting, and while it does illuminate all keys and secondary functions, it's only customized in a single zone. So the whole thing is set to the same color out of about 13 options. The keyboard lighting can be adjusted between 4 different levels of brightness or turned off either with the keys and the numpad or through the included software. Overall, I did like typing on the keyboard, though the presses were a little mushy feeling. Here's how it sounds to give you an idea of what to expect. There was some keyboard flex when pushing down hard, but it was never an issue during normal day-to-day use. And I found the letter keys needed 59 grams of force to actuate. The precision touchpad worked fine. It doesn't click down, but has separate left and right click buttons below. I liked its size and had no issues with it. Fingerprints and dirt show up on the matte interior, though they were a little harder to see, and they were easy to clean off the smooth finish. On the left from the back, there's a Kensington lock, air exhaust vent, USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type A port, USB 2.0 Type A port, and 3.5mm mic and headphone jacks. On the right from the front, there's a second USB 3.1 Type A port, but Gen 2 this time, mini DisplayPort 1.2 output, SD card slot, and another air exhaust vent. On the back, there's an air exhaust vent on the left. The right isn't actually a vent. Then for the I/O from left to right, there's a USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C port, which supports DisplayPort 1.3, but no Thunderbolt support though, HDMI 2.0 output, Gigabit Ethernet, and the power input. I like that some of the bulky I/O was on the back as the cables will be out of the way. The front just has some status LEDs towards the right. To remove the bottom panel, you first remove 14 Phillips head screws. The battery is also easily removable, so if you have a spare, you could quickly swap in a fully charged one, a nice and uncommon feature these days. Underneath the battery, there are 3 more smaller Phillips head screws to take out before the bottom panel can be removed. Once inside from left to right, we've got the Wi-Fi card, 2.5-inch drive bay, 2 memory slots in the center, and 2 M.2 slots towards the right. One of these supports both SATA and NVMe PCIe, while the second is NVMe PCIe only. The bottom space under the wrist rest is looking a little empty and wasted. The speakers are found down here at the front. They sounded okay, perhaps a little below average in terms of quality with no bass, though they get loud enough at max volume, and the latency mon results looked good. There's a 49 watt-hour battery powering the laptop. I've tested it with the screen brightness at 50%, background apps disabled, and all keyboard lighting off. While just watching YouTube videos, it lasted for 3 hours and 40 minutes, and it was using the Intel integrated graphics due to Nvidia Optimus. While playing The Witcher 3 with medium settings and Nvidia's battery boost set to 30 FPS, the battery lasted for an hour and 2 minutes. However, it was consistently sitting at 25 FPS throughout the whole test. The battery didn't seem capable of providing full performance. However, it didn't dip at any point during the test. The 180 watt power brick that's included with the Aorus 7 was adequate for these specs. I wasn't seeing any drain during any of my testing. Let's move on to the thermal testing. Air is pulled in underneath the machine through the vents in the center and is exhausted out of the left and right sides, and from one of the exhausts on the back towards the left. The vent on the right isn't real as the removable battery is behind there. Inside, there appears to be at least one heat pipe shared between the processor and graphics, with the 2 fans near the previously mentioned exhausts. The control center software allows us to swap between 4 different modes: quiet, power saving, entertainment, and performance. I only found these modes to modify power limits and fan speeds. No overclocking or undervolting was done automatically. We've also got the option to adjust fan speed. Granted, the curves are a little limited. I've tested with the fans either set to auto or maximum, but as you'll hear later, there's basically no difference when under heavy load. Thermal testing was completed in an ambient room temperature of 21 degrees Celsius, so expect different results in different environments. At idle in quiet mode, both the CPU and GPU were looking good. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU workloads, and are meant to represent worst case scenarios as I ran them for extended periods of time. The gaming results towards the upper half of the graph were tested by playing Watch Dogs 2, as I find it to use a good combination of processor and graphics. The stress test results shown on the lower half of the graph are from running the Aorus-64 CPU stress test with only the stress CPU option checked, and the Heaven GPU benchmark at max settings at the same time to fully load the system. Starting with the stress tests, in quiet mode, both the CPU and GPU were thermal throttling, which is to be expected. This mode prioritizes quieter fan speeds, as you'll hear later. By enabling entertainment mode, the fan speeds raise up, resulting in the GPU temperature lowering. In performance mode, the CPU temperature rises up further now as the power limit is increased, allowing it to perform better at the expense of higher temperatures. When I manually set the fans to maximum, there was no difference. As you'll hear later, they were going at the same speed under this workload regardless of whether or not I set them to max or auto. As it was already hot enough anyway, full speed was being reached in auto mode. Undervolting the CPU by minus 0.1 volts, the furthest I could go in this workload, didn't help the temperatures much, while the cooling pad was finally able to remove thermal throttling. The gaming results showed a similar pattern, just with slightly lower temperatures on the CPU, but slightly higher on the GPU with an actual game running, but temps will vary based on game anyway. These are the average clock speeds for the same tests just shown. In quiet mode, regardless of with a game or stress test running, the CPU and GPU clock speeds are much lower due to the lower power limits set by quiet mode, but also due to thermal limitations as a result of the low fan speed. In entertainment mode, the fan speeds rise up, allowing for higher clock speeds. And then the CPU sees a further power limit boost in performance mode, further increasing CPU clock speed. In the stress tests, we can see there's no real difference with the fan set to default auto mode compared to being set to maximum speed, as they were running at max anyway due to the thermal throttling that was taking place. In the gaming results though, there was a little clock speed boost with the max fan speed, presumably as running an actual game is less constant. Undervolting the CPU improved the average clock speed across all 6 cores by over 200 MHz in each of these tests. Then adding the cooling pad allowed the CPU to finally average the full 4 GHz all-core turbo boost speed of the i7-9750H CPU. These are the TDP values during these same tests. The power used in quiet mode is the lowest, again due to the lower power limits these modes set. but also due to thermal throttling on the CPU and GPU as a result of the lower fan speeds. The GTX 1660 Ti has an 80 watt power limit, but when under stress test, this wasn't often hit due to thermal throttling. When gaming outside of quiet mode, the 1660 Ti was averaging around its 80 watt limit, so full performance was possible there. It was also good to see the 9750H was able to get to around 55 watts on average even under this combined stress test. Although this does result in the highest CPU temperatures we saw previously, it also means we should see higher levels of performance compared to other machines that follow the Intel spec of limiting this to 45 watts. Here are the CPU clock speeds while under a CPU-only stress test. The results are higher as the GPU is not contributing heat to the system. Despite this, to sit at the full 4 GHz all-core turbo boost speed, the undervolt was required. This is because the 60 watt power limit was being hit in performance mode in this CPU-only workload. This throttle could be removed by raising the power limit with software like Intel XTU. However, that would have raised the temperature further, whereas the undervolt was able to reduce it by 10 degrees while also reaching higher speeds. To demonstrate how this translates into performance, I've got some Cinebench CPU benchmarks from these same modes. Quiet and power saver modes gave the same performance. And then we can see things step up with entertainment and performance mode, as these raise CPU power limits. I was able to further boost this with the CPU undervolt and improve it a little further by raising the power limit above the default 60 watts with Intel XTU. So how do these different changes actually affect game performance? I've tested some games to find out. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was tested with the built-in benchmark at highest settings. Even with the quiet profile, above 60 FPS was being hit in this test at max settings. And we could slightly improve the result by undervolting the CPU and raising the CPU power limit. Far Cry 5 was tested with the built-in benchmark at ultra settings. There was less of a difference here outside of quiet mode. This is more of a CPU test, and quiet mode results in thermal throttling due to the slower fan speed, but also reduces the CPU power limit. Battlefield 5 was tested with ultra settings in campaign mode, and again there weren't really many differences in this game. It was still very playable while running the fans quieter, as you'll hear soon. As for the external temperatures where you'll actually be putting your hands, at idle it was quite cool, below the 30 or so I usually see. With the stress tests going in quiet mode, some parts were getting to 50 degrees. It was quite warm. With entertainment mode enabled, it was around 10 degrees cooler in some of those hotspots, as this boosts the fan speed. In performance mode, it was pretty similar. The fans were the same speed, though as we saw earlier, internals are a little warmer now due to the higher CPU power limits. There wasn't really any difference while gaming in performance mode either. Here's what the fans sound like during these different tests. At idle in quiet mode, the fan was still audible, and a couple of decibels louder if I left it idling in performance mode instead. When under stress test or gaming in the quiet profile, it was still fairly quiet, much better compared to most other machines, especially when we consider that games were still playable in this mode, as we saw earlier. The fan speed was the same in entertainment or performance mode, with the fans either at auto or max speed. Overall, there was thermal throttling on the CPU and some on the GPU, both under worst case stress test and even some with this particular game, but it will vary based on the workload. This was happening even with the fan at max speed, but primarily in performance mode. This is an expected trade-off of boosting the CPU power limit above Intel's 45 watt spec to 60 watts. We get better performance, like we saw in the Cinebench results, but it comes at the expense of higher temperatures. With some undervolting and using a cooling pad, it was possible to remove the thermal throttling and average the full turbo boost speed though, which I think is a fair result given many other laptops can't do this. Next, let's take a look at some gaming benchmarks. I've tested these with the fans at max speed, though as we just saw, they're basically maxed out under load anyway, and in performance mode for best performance. I only recently added Borderlands 3 to my testing, and I've used DirectX 11 as 12 is still in beta. With these specs, high settings were able to reach 60 FPS, while low settings was able to sit around 100 FPS. Battlefield 5 was tested in campaign mode, and it played fine maxed out at ultra settings. There wasn't much difference to 1% low performance regardless of setting level, due to some of that previously mentioned CPU thermal throttling. Apex Legends was tested with either all settings at maximum or all settings at the lowest possible values, as it doesn't have predefined setting presets. It was still playing nicely with everything at maximum, averaging just over 100 FPS, though we could boost average FPS by 32% with minimum settings. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was tested with the built-in benchmark, and the results here were pretty good. Highest settings was actually slightly ahead of the Lenovo Y540 with same processor and graphics, but we'll see how these results compare with other laptops soon. Fortnite was tested with the replay feature, and as a less demanding game, even epic settings was playing fine with above 100 FPS averages, while high settings was pretty close to the refresh rate of the panel, and sitting at 100 for the 1% low. Overwatch is another well-optimized game and was tested in the practice range. Again, it was still playing well with max settings, not far off the refresh rate of the screen, though we could easily surpass this with lower setting presets. CSGO was tested using the Euletical FPS benchmark, and as a game that depends primarily on CPU power limits, the results aren't really that different compared to most other laptops I've tested with the same i7 CPU. Dota 2 was tested playing in the middle lane and is in the same boat. It depends more on the CPU than the GPU, so the results aren't much different compared to other i7 based laptops I've tested, even if they have lower tier graphics. Rainbow Six Siege was tested with the built-in benchmark, and in this test, high settings was above the refresh rate of the display, though even Ultra would likely still work just fine given it was averaging over 120 FPS. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was tested with the built-in benchmark, and although this is a CPU-heavy test and typically scores lower frame rates, it doesn't need high settings to play. 60 FPS was still possible in this test at very high settings. The Division 2 was tested with the built-in benchmark, and 60 FPS was still being reached with ultra settings, while low settings was just able to match the refresh rate of the display in this test. If you're after more gaming benchmarks, check the card in the top right corner where I've tested 21 games in total. Let's also take a look at how this config of the Aorus 7 SA compares with other laptops. Use these results as a rough guide only, as they were tested at different times with different drivers. In Battlefield 5, I've got the Aorus 7 highlighted in red near similarly spec'd machines. This game was performing very closely to the Lenovo Y540 just above it in terms of average frame rate, as they've got the same specs. The 1% low from the Aorus 7 was lower comparatively, which seemed to be due to the CPU thermal throttling. These are the results from Far Cry 5 with ultra settings in the built-in benchmark. Again, the Aorus 7 was quite close to the Y540 with same specs, though this time in this game, the 1% low was the same, so it's looking alright here. These are the results from Shadow of the Tomb Raider with the built-in benchmark at highest settings. This time the average frame rate was 1 FPS ahead of the Y540 with same specs, and 8% ahead of the G3 with 1660 Ti Max-Q. Like the other games though, the Helios 300 with the same specs was ahead out of the box as it's tuned well. As I've said in the past, and as we've just seen here, I think the GTX 1660 Ti is a great sweet spot when it comes to laptop graphics. When combined with the i7 CPU and dual-channel memory, we're able to play basically any modern game with decent frame rates. Now for the benchmarking tools. I've tested Heaven, Valley, and Superposition from Unigine, as well as Firestrike, TimeSpy, and VRMark from 3DMark. Just pause the video if you want a detailed look at these results. I've used Crystal DiskMark to test the storage, and the 512GB NVMe M.2 SSD was performing well. Excellent read speeds, but much lower writes comparatively. The 1TB hard drive was performing lower than expected considering it's a 7200 RPM drive, and the SD card slot was okay. For updated pricing, check the links in the description, as prices will change over time. At the time of recording in the US, I can only find the NA configuration available, which comes with GTX 1650 graphics, and is going for $1,150 on sale. This current price seems a little hard to justify, when you could get a 1660 Ti Helios 300 for less, which will outperform it. From my own testing, the 1660 Ti is around 47% faster than the 1650, so paying more to get less is hard to justify. Here in Australia, we're looking at $2,100 Australian on sale for the SA model with 1660 Ti graphics, so $100 less than the Helios 300 with same specs. With all of that in mind, let's conclude by looking at the good and bad aspects of the Aorus 7 gaming laptop. Apart from pricing, the biggest issue I had with the actual machine was the CPU thermal throttling. This seems to be due to the result of a higher power limit, so that's going to be a trade-off. Though given the near 3cm thickness, I thought thermals would be a bit better. Looking at the positives though, this does mean the CPU power was able to get quite high once thermals were controlled, and we did have the option of playing games while running fairly quiet. In terms of gaming performance, for the most part, it seemed fairly in line with other 1660 Ti gaming laptops that I've tested. The battery life was on the lower side, however it does have the uncommon advantage of being fully removable, although I haven't yet seen Gigabyte selling these, so I'm not sure how you'd get them. The screen was decent for a gaming laptop in terms of color gamut, brightness and contrast, though my unit did have a little bleed, but that will vary. For me personally, I prefer a 15-inch machine. Pretty much the only advantage of this 17-inch laptop is that you get the larger screen size at the expense of it being larger and heavier than a 15-inch version. As we saw inside, there appears to be a fair bit of unused space, mainly towards the front. It could have been better if the components were moved down and more materials were dedicated to combating thermals. The Aorus 7 is using the Clevo NH70 RCQ chassis. I really liked the 15-inch version of this, the NH58 RCQ. However, despite being larger, it seems that there are more thermal limitations with this larger unit, or at least with this specific machine. In the end though, at the current price, it's difficult to recommend the Aorus 7 over the competition. This could all change if the price lowers though, so keep an eye out with the links in the description. Let me know what you thought about the Aorus 7 gaming laptop down in the comments, and if you're new to the channel, consider getting subscribed for future laptop reviews and tech videos like this one.